Also, the host of that last session, it was all right. On that note, this is actually where I need to say goodbye. It's been real this morning. Oh, look, I had there's one. I've just been announced on Celebrity Race Across the World, coming soon to BBC. So if you see me having a mental breakdown on television over the next few weeks, mind your business, all right? Okay. Trying to sell my fiance for a goat. That did try happen, all right? So just keep your eye out for that. Matt will be back after the next presentation to round off the conference for you. I've really enjoyed it. And of course, moving on to our last final presentation of the day. You can't spell radio without ROI. I had to count out my head, radio ROI. So, of course, that's what we're going with. And now to unveil brand new research on the ROI of radio and audio, please give a warm welcome to Radiocentre's Planning Director, Mark Barber, and WPP Media's EVP of Analytics, Jane Christian.
For the avoidance of any doubt, I'm Mark. Jane's sitting in the audience, and I'll be handing the baton over to her very shortly. And, well, 2 research presentations in one morning. We're really spoiling you lot today, aren't we, eh? Did you know, apparently, you only get the opportunity to launch breakthrough audio ROI research just twice in your career, once on the way up and once on the way back down. So I'd just like to say, it's great to be back. So this session is designed to give you the full SP on the findings from our brand new, and some might say long overdue, audio ROI analysis, high gain audio. Did you see what we did there? But before diving into the detail of what we did and what we found out, I'm going to set the scene by explaining why we conducted this analysis and what we set out to discover. So let's start by taking a brief trip down memory lane, all the way back to 2013, probably when these graphics that I put together were developed, when we launched the ROI multiplier study. And despite the slightly dated design sensibilities, this project broke new ground in evaluating radio advertising ROI, with the findings derived from a broad data set of 517 multimedia campaigns, which were contributed by a wide range of media agencies and standalone econometric suppliers. And I'm sure that many of you, will remember the headline finding that radio revenue ROI was £7.70, ranking it only second to TV in terms of payback relative to media cost. Perhaps more importantly though, the analysis also revealed how overall campaign effectiveness could be optimised by increasing radio's share of total media budget to 20%, at which point total campaign ROI grew by more than 8%. Now, on the back of this best practice learning, it's generally acknowledged that this study really raised the bar for radio and encouraged many advertisers to harness the full ROI potential of the medium for their brands. Now, I can imagine what you're thinking at this point. There's been a lot of big media developments in the last 12 years since this study was launched. Surely these will have led to a paradigm shift in media ROI dynamics. Well, it's true that back in 2013, programmatic trading was still in its infancy and had yet to be adopted at scale. Fast forward to 2024, and we can see how pure-play digital channels now dominate ad spend as organisations seek to exploit the perceived benefits of the targeting efficiencies they promise. And as Matt's already covered, you'll hear me say that a few times, there's been a lot of change in the world of audio since 2013 too. The launch of the Amazon Echo in 2016, now found in around half of UK households, combined with a significant increase in smartphone penetration, means that the audio content is now truly multi-platform, making it more and more seamlessly accessible in and out of the home, wherever people are and whatever they're doing. And again, revisiting some of the territory covered by Matt and basically his echo chamber today, when we focus purely on audio services that carry advertising, we see the impact of this increased accessibility in record commercial audio audiences, buoyed by 23% growth across the last 5 years alone. And as this chart demonstrates, while broadcast remains the predominant listening platform, the primary driver of growth in recent years has been listening through IP-connected devices, which now account for almost half of all listening. And in parallel to the growth in connected listening, broadcasters have evolved their commercial offering to allow advertisers to combine the efficiency of digital targeting with the cut-through and emotional heft of audio. And bearing in mind that DAX was almost a year away from launch when the ROI multiplier was conducted, these developments on their own represent a significant advance in the effectiveness potential of audio advertising. Again, Matt, in our Speed of Sound report published earlier this year, we explored how this evolving commercial proposition would impact the role and effectiveness of audio advertising. Using broad demand generation and demand conversion objectives as a framework, we reviewed the available evidence to develop hypotheses about how different commercial audio formats combine to perform these functions for advertisers. Our analysis identified the unique characteristics of broadcast radio and digital audio for delivering both demand generation and demand conversion campaigns, and indicated how these complementary characteristics, when used in combination, can deliver cumulative benefits and improved outcomes to advertisers. Now, I don't have time, you'll be pleased to know, to run through all the detail now, but the full report is freely available on the Radiocentre website, so please head over there to find out more, but wait until this presentation's finished, please. Now, as this brief review and Matt's earlier review of the data suggests, commercial audio in 2025 is in a very healthy position. Yet despite all the positive momentum in terms of audience growth and cross-platform audio advertising offering, multi-platform audio ad revenue has been growing at a much slower rate than its audience. As you can see from this chart, over the last year, total multi-platform audio ad revenue grew at around a third of the rate of the total commercial audio audience. So this raises an important question. What's required to motivate advertisers to reappraise and exploit the full potential of multi-platform audio? In an attempt to unearth the answer to this question, in summer 2024, Radiocentre ran a customer feedback survey exploring this territory. And among a number of threads, one theme came through very strongly: an unfulfilled need for new audio ROI data which substantiates the value of using digital audio and broadcast radio in combination, and which helps justify the relative price positioning of digital audio. So that insight shaped the core objectives for this study, as shown on the screen now. Essentially, we set out to develop ROI evidence to underpin those hypotheses we developed in Speed of Sound. And within this, we also wanted to explore multi-platform audio's effect on total campaign ROI. Now, I think it's fair to say, for any econometrician, that that's a very challenging set of objectives. And the first and most important thing you need before you can even begin to conduct analysis to this level of detail is a robust and credible data set to examine. Now, we could have spent months or even years trying to build our own. But we were in luck because shortly before we developed this brief, ThinkBox, WPP Media and Ubiquity released the results of their Profitability 2 study, based on a broad and deep data set that allowed for detailed analysis across a wide range of media, including a substantial number of audio campaigns. As the originators of this project, we asked our friends at ThinkBox if they would consider allowing us access to this award-winning data set. Thankfully, they agreed, and Matt Hill kindly reintroduced me to Jane Christian, who was one of the most significant contributors to the original ROI Multiplier project back in 2013. And despite this previous experience, I'm delighted to say that Jane was prepared to work with us again to help develop updated and nuanced learning about the ROI effects of multi-platform audio. So that's enough from me for the time being. Now over to Jane to explain the dataset, how it was analysed, what we discovered. Please welcome Jane to the stage. Good luck.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to dive straight into the methodology because there's quite a lot to take you through today. So Mark's taken you through the brief. It was quite extensive. So we took a two-pronged approach to answering all of the questions. Firstly, it was about mining that Profitability 2 data set for all of the total level audio results that sit within it. Now, for any of you who missed Profitability 2 last year, as Mark said, 5 agencies pooled all of their MMM data together, and that meant there was 141 brands worth of MMM data in this data set. Unfortunately for us, 84 of those are spent on audio. So that's a huge data set for us to run scenarios from. But the challenge with Profitability 2, and it's a great data set, is that for audio, it measures audio as a total bucket. And some of those questions that Mark and the team have been getting about how digital audio compares to broadcast radio, we can't get that from this study. So we've had to build an extension to that study, which is the second part of our approach here. And that's identifying a number of advertisers where we can split apart in their MMMs digital audio from broadcast radio. And the reason why it isn't done in Profitability 2 is because it isn't a common approach yet in every MMM model to split it out. So we've had to create our own data here. Now, before I carry on, I'm probably going to trip up at some point and get these the wrong way around. It's probably worth us getting all on the same page and defining what we mean exactly by these two buckets, broadcast radio and digital audio. So broadcast radio is linear radio listened to via a non-IP device, whereas digital audio is linear radio listened to on an IP device, but it also includes podcasts and streamed music services. So we've created our mini data set to append to Profitability 2, which we've called our multi-platform audio set. We've found 5 brands that spent enough on both forms of audio where we can split it apart in their MMM models. You can see from here, it's across 4 sectors, there's a decent amount of spend. If we look at the spend profile of those brands, you can see that there's about 15% of their budget on audio, and about a third of that, just under a third, is going on to digital audio and the rest onto broadcast radio. Now, a couple of points to make on this slide. Now, clearly, this is not the heady heights of 84 brands, which we'd love to have, which is in Profitability 2. This is very much a starting point, but we're absolutely delighted to take the first step along the journey, and it's very much something we'd like all MMM agencies to do, is to help us build further on these results, splitting it out. Secondly, these are larger spenders than average on audio, but I would say that is a feature and not a bug to this data set, because they needed to be the advertisers that are spending a lot on both forms of audio for us to tease it apart in their models. So then how do we combine the two data sets? We have our 7 advertisers, and we created an index of ROI. So we take for any advertiser that we modelled there, what's the average ROI? Set that at 100, and for digital audio and broadcast radio, how much above or below that average are they? And then we can average across those indices. The next thing is going to the Profitability 2 data set, where we've got a total number for audio, and we apply the indices for the 2 audio elements that we're looking at to the Profitability 2 data, which means then we can kind of add it onto Profitability 2 and to be able to compare against all of the other channels. Right, almost done on methodology. Let's dive into the results. When I say almost done, we're going to look at the Profitability 2 numbers to begin with. There's just one other key thing that it's worth pointing out here, which is the time frames that study measured advertising's payback over. There were 2 time frames. Firstly, look at short-term payback. This is the payback within the first 3 months of an ad running. There's also like a carryover effect, a sustained payback from advertising, which comes between 4 months and 2 years as the brands were able to measure it. If we add the sustained payback to the short term, we get what we've called the full term. So what you're going to see today is the full term, the 2-year effects, and the short term, the 3-month effects. So going into the data, finally I hear you say, but we just thought it was important to get us all on the same page here. If we start off with the full term, the 2-year results, you're used to seeing from Profitability 2 bubble charts, but here we've translated it into an easier to read bar chart. Across all 141 brands, all categories in the data set, the average full term 2-year ROI was 411. And you can see from here, audio was actually 21% above that average. If we then have a look at the short-term effect, the 3-month effect, we see that the average all category ROI is 187, and again we're seeing audio punching way above that average, 32% higher. So the key question, because this is what came out in Profitability 2 last year, but a key build on this is, what does the same hold true for both digital audio and broadcast radio? And adding the data from our 7 brands into this, we can say categorically that yes, it does. So now we've broken it out. We're starting here again with the full term effect, that 2-year effect. And you can see actually both digital audio and broadcast radio sit right next to each other on the hierarchy, and they're both above average. And the same is true again when we look at that short-term effect. Both are next to each other coincidentally on the hierarchy and sit above the average. For those of you paying attention to the numbers there, you'll also notice that the digital audio ROI was slightly higher than the broadcast radio one. That probably isn't too much of a surprise on one hand, because if you remember from the beginning, the majority of the spend is on broadcast radio. The more we spend, the ROIs tend to fall. Why I'm delighted to see this is I easily get a bee in my bonnet, and one bee in my bonnet often is when people talk about cost per thousands and make conclusions and that. It doesn't matter. This data is saying that the cost per thousand for digital audio is more than broadcast radio. What matters is pounds in and profit out, which is what you're seeing on this chart here, and we're seeing very similar returns from both. Now, we had those results, and Mark and the team then asked us to look at 2 interesting scenarios, probably both extremes of scenarios that we could run. And they were around, well, if we didn't have audio in the mix, what would that do to ROI? Well, obviously, you can see it's going to fall here because it's above average ROI. But on the other end of the scale, how much could we spend on audio if we maxed out the profitable level of spend? So let's have a look at how we approach that. So we've set up a base scenario here, and we've run this over the short-term period, and we can do it across 6 of the 7 brands. And this base scenario starting point is a scenario where we've stripped out for those 6 brands the spend on audio. So it's just left the spend on the other channels. And to make the maths easy for me on stage, we're saying the index campaign ROI is 100. Now, if we add back in audio to the mix in the ratio that these brands have actually spent it at, so this is the reality for these brands, what you see is that the index of total campaign ROI goes up by 5%. So what that's saying is campaigns for these 6 brands, when they have audio in, the whole mix, the whole campaign is 5% more effective than the mix without audio in. Hopefully you're following me so far. Now, to get to the other extreme example, we wanted to understand if we were to push spend on audio to its max, what would that look like? And there's a bar going to appear here in a second. But before that bar appears, I want to talk to you about how we get to that maximised spend scenario. I have to go back and do a bit of theory that you all know, but let's get it all so it's fresh in your mind. And that's the theory of diminishing returns. So on this chart, you can see this is an illustrative example. The blue line shows that as we spend more in any week here on a particular channel, we get more profit back, but it's not a straight line, it's a curve. And we know that's because of diminishing returns. And that's also reflected in the green line here, which is the average ROI that we can see. But it is the all-important third curve, the orange one here, which is the marginal ROI, which is the key one that we use when we're redistributing spend across channels. For those of you that aren't familiar with marginal ROI, the easiest way I like to explain it is that any point on the curve, it's the return that you get from the last pound that was spent. So to bring that to life with an example here, in this example, if we spent £300,000 on this channel in a week, you can read from the blue line on the left-hand axis that would generate about £1.1 million worth of profit. Reading off the green line on the right-hand axis, you'd see that gives us an average ROI of about 3.5. But reading off the orange line, you can see that the last pound spent, the marginal ROI is just over 2. Hopefully you're still following with me. So in this scenario, what we've done is to keep spending on both forms of audio until the marginal ROI equals 1. So i.e. the last pound that we spent is just about breaking even. We'd never spend more than that because then we'd probably be spending £1 and only making 99p return. So the question is, if we spend up to the point where marginal ROI equals 1, what return will we get, and could we spend any more? And actually, the table here on the right-hand side, if you look at the one that's labelled £1 there, that is that scenario. So if we spend up to the point where we're just about breaking even on radio, the absolute max, looks like here like we could double spend on both forms of audio. I've done another couple of scenarios out of interest as well. Probably if we spend up to the point where the last pound equals 150, we can still increase spend, and that's leaving a lot of profit on the table. This isn't quite the final scenario that I'm going to build onto that chart though, because this is, if there's any econometricians in the rooms, you'll be thinking, wow, we're extrapolating a lot above current spend levels here. So you also have to pass this through your audio specialist to give it a bit of a sniff test on, could this be bought within the current audio strategy for those brands, which we did with our in-house audio specialists, which enables us to get to the final scenario. So what you're seeing here is, across our 6 brands, if we're to keep spending up until the point where marginal ROI equals 1, our max level of spend, or it's impractical to buy any more inventory in the current strategy, we'd spend up to 24% on audio, taking it out of other channels, and that would give us an overall campaign ROI of 108, i.e. 8.2% higher ROI for the campaign versus the no audio scenario. Now at this point, in fairness, I'm going to say we could have run a similar scenario for any of the channels that had the above average ROI. Putting more spend into them up to a point would also create an improvement in ROI. That's great. We'll leave that for the respective industry bodies to do their versions of that. But the key point I want you to take out of this is that there is headroom, profitable headroom left for both forms of audio. So if I sum up, the key takeouts would be that when we look at profitability 2 data, audio has a higher short-term and full-term ROI than the average channel. And that is absolutely still true when we break out the effects into digital audio and broadcast radio. If we removed audio from the mix, we'd be missing out on 5% of the whole campaign's ROI. And then finally, if we were to maximise the spend into audio, we could actually spend up to 24% based on our brands, and that would deliver an 8% higher ROI than a scenario without audio in. So I'm going to hand back over to Mark to wrap up.
Right. Hello again, like a bagged penny, I'm turning up, and we covered a lot of ground in this session. So my job in the next 5 minutes or so is to provide a brief wrap up of the key takeouts and consider how the learning might be applied to help advertisers amplify their campaign effects. Before I do, I'd like to say a big thanks to Jane and her team for all the hard yards they put into this project, drilling down into the data to unearth, sure you'll agree, these fascinating and compelling findings, and really necessary findings as well, that were so vividly brought to life by Jane in the last 10 minutes. And having been taken through the detail of this analysis, I went too quickly. Having been taken through the detail of this analysis, I hope now you'll be broadly aligned with my main takeaway, which I've just revealed, which is this: multi-platform audio is clearly underinvested, by which I mean that advertisers are clearly failing to invest sufficient resources into the medium to exploit its full potential for amplifying total campaign ROI. And here's a brief reminder of the evidence that supports this hypothesis. Firstly, the data reveals how both broadcast radio and digital audio significantly outperform by at least 20% the all media average ROI, both in the full and short term. And beyond these straightforward ROI comparisons with other media, we've heard from Jane how the data reveals that audio's got plenty of headroom to continue paying back profitably at much higher levels of investment than it currently receives. And when maximised in this way, it significantly amplifies total campaign ROI. So having reappraised these findings, you might now be considering how the learning can be applied in the real world to help generate better results. Well, even if you're not, I'm still going to quickly run through some ideas that we've developed along these lines, presented in the handy format of the Radiocentre 3-step guide to amplifying campaign effects using multi-platform audio. And the first step to getting the most from its use in the media mix is to be more ambitious with the budget you allocate to audio. It's clear from this analysis that there are significant advantages available to advertisers who exploit audio's marginal ROI headroom and allocate a greater proportion of total media spend to both broadcast radio and digital audio. Our multi-platform audio dataset reveals that reallocating media spend to max out budget share at 24% leads to an 8% increase in short-term total campaign ROI compared to the same media spend excluding audio. Based on this finding, and acknowledging that each individual media campaign will have a unique set of dynamics to accommodate, we're advocating that to benefit more fully from the median's proven amplification effect on total campaign ROI, as a broad rule of thumb, advertisers should pursue an audio budget share horizon of around 20% of their total media spend, with the exact share depending on individual campaign status, goals, target audience, etc., etc. Now, I'm pretty sure I heard a collective sharp intake of breath at that announcement. So, I'd just like to quickly reassure you that no, I'm not high, but I can appreciate there are a number of reasons why you might feel this way, which I'm going to try and address head on now. So let's start by putting that 20% rule of thumb into context. Earlier, I shared the finding from the original ROI multiplier study, which, based on a different and again extremely robust data set, demonstrated how overall campaign ROI was optimized 8% higher, with radio allocated a 20% share of the total media budget. And considering supporting evidence from an audience perspective, the latest IPA touchpoints data reveals that audio in total accounts for around a quarter of all time that UK adults spend with media content. When considered in tandem with this latest data, it's clear that these two facts offer a reassuring degree of triangulation, essentially a method of validating the credibility and depth of research findings using 3 or more related data points or sources. Now, if you're starting to feel persuaded by the logic and are considering increasing audio share of your media budget to 20%, please be reassured you'll be in good company. Many of the UK's biggest advertisers are some of the most ambitious when it comes to audio budget allocation. According to Nielsen Ad Intel, the brands featured here spent around 20% or more of their total media spend on radio alone across at least one 12-month period within the last 5 years. So if on the basis of the evidence you've seen so far, you're thinking about joining this club, the next question on your mind is likely to be, come on, where am I going to find the money from to fund this level of increase in audio budget? And that's obviously a very reasonable question. So acknowledging that I can't offer a detailed bottom-up analysis for individual campaigns, here's a suggestion developed from a top-down perspective. Based on the assumption there's likely to be greater flexibility and room to manoeuvre within the budget line that nowadays accounts for a significant proportion of media spend for many advertisers, I'd recommend starting by considering how you might reallocate some pure play internet spend within your plan to upweight audio to this degree. Now, I suspect this suggestion will feel most challenging for performance-led advertisers, but as Donna revealed earlier, audio is proven efficient in driving total web sessions and users, aided by its ability to boost organic and paid search referrals. And there's other data that supports sourcing additional audio funds from pure play internet budgets. Beyond its uplift effect on performance metrics, when we compare how effectively audio stacks up directly against pure play digital channels, we can see how the individual audio formats are the top 2 performers in terms of short-term profit ROI, with only generic PPC offering any serious competition for budgets. And that contrast is even more stark when we consider full-time profit ROI, with both audio formats offering a minimum 30% ROI advantage compared to any of the pure play digital channels. Now, a further benefit in deciding to boost your budget towards audio budget towards 20% is that you naturally create the funding headroom to both maintain optimal use of broadcast radio and concurrently augment its effects with the addition of suitably funded digital audio activity. In this context, the second best practice step towards optimizing total campaign ROI is to use digital audio as a supplement to, actually I'm going to go back one. I revealed too early again, sorry, going too early today. Supplement to, not a substitute for broadcast radio. And this, I have to say, is crucial to acknowledge. Because broadcast radio and digital audio play complementary roles for advertisers in maximising weekly campaign reach, which in turn is proven to play a primary role in eliciting better effects from audio advertising. You can't just chip away at one and put it in the other and expect things to get better. Both need to grow. So now I can do the reveal. For rule of thumb guidance on setting optimum weekly reach goals specific to your campaign status, please check out our Radio Planning Optimizer, which has been built on a meta-analysis of 450 individual in-market radio campaigns. And finally, if the first two best practice steps relate to more ambitious use of multi-platform audio, the third focuses on the value of more ambitious measurement in unlocking the full potential from your audio media spend. And because, to borrow a line from Jane, ultimately nothing beats doing it for yourself, our final best practice recommendation is to call for advertisers to evolve their MMM capabilities to identify the individual contributions of both broadcast radio and digital audio to their business success. And one of the ways of improving outputs from the modelling process is to improve the inputs. So our rule of thumb in this instance, there could be others, but here's our one, is to use campaign audience reports from Jet and Audiolab to ensure that your MMM is built on the most accurate and nuanced data available. So there it is, our handy 3-step guide to amplifying campaign effects using multi-platform audio. And a final observation on this basis: even if just a quarter of the people viewing this session in the room and online adopt these guidelines, in a few years' time, that will create a much wider and deeper audio data set for us to access for any future analyses of this nature. So on that note, it's time to bring this session to an end, but before I do, a couple more things to tell you. Firstly, this presentation will be available on the Radiocentre website later today. Well, I think it will be. And we'll be publishing a detailed report of the findings later in the autumn. And secondly, if you have any questions about either of the research projects that we've covered today, please seek out Donna or me at lunchtime. So, thanks again to Jane and the team. Thanks to you for listening. That's finally it. Back over to Matt now to wrap up the morning. Cheers.